Hello and welcome back to Lesson 1 on Programming in Python. This video is part of the IGCSE Computer Science series of videos for programming in Python. And if you are following on from the last video where I introduced you to Python as a language, how to set up variables and constants, and how to use different data types, as I mentioned to you in the last video, what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be exploring the different types of loops that we can use within Python and also if statements. Now, if you don't have access to these lesson slides as I said in the last video, obviously do drop me a message underneath this video and I will give you access to these. Pretty much everything which we're doing here you can see on these slides here now anyway. So what I'm going to do is just talk about REPL as a piece of software. So firstly, we're using REPL to teach computer science because this is in-browser software. So you don't have to download any software to program on your computer. You can do this on an iPhone, on an Android phone, or tablet, or iPad, or computer, kind of whatever you want. Now, in order for you to kind of get started with REPL, right, you're going to have to sign up to REPL. But once you are signed in here, I'm just going to open up my Home tab in a new tab. You're going to be able to find a Create button here. And when you create a file, you can find that file underneath My REPLs. So if I click on My REPLs here, I'm going to be able to find these different folders and these different files that I've created. But in order to get started in Python, we're going to press on Create, and this automatically defaults to Python 3, and you can then give your file a name here. Now, once you've kind of done that, you'll be brought to a window which looks something like this. And I'm just going to walk you through the different functionality of REPL. So in this middle section, this is where we write our code. Main.py is the file which is defaulting to Python. If you want to create a secondary file or have lots of files within this one program, just select on Add File and type in loops. And make sure you give it a name loops.py. Otherwise, it's not going to be stored as a Python file. Okay. So now that we've done that, we've got two files here. But actually, in order to get loops.file or loops.py to run, we need to copy the contents of this file over to main.py. Or we can just kind of switch these files around or label this as main.py. But we can kind of come to that in other videos. Okay, so this is how you create a file. If you want to create a folder and have lots of files down here for like lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, you can. And then along the left-hand side, this is where you can kind of customize different things. So you've got like a version control, debugger, you can install different packages in Python. There are just so many different cool things which you can do with inside REPL. I will come to these tools a little bit later in the IGCSE Computer Science series of videos where we need to use different packages or where we're kind of looking at file handling here. Now, in order to get your code to run, any code which you run, we can see inside our console window over here. Just press on the green button to run the program, and then you'll be prompted in your console window. And if you've got a variable or data structure, you can enter data over here. Now, let's move on to loops and also if statements. So, for those of you which are new to loops, a loop is something which goes kind of around and around like that. That's the definition in English, right? This is allowing a program or something to repeat itself either forever, a loop which would go around continuously, sorry, mixing my words a bit here, or we also have a loop which can iterate a particular number of times, so repeat itself a number of times and then stop. So in Python we have got two different loop types. So the first one is a for loop, and my for loop here we've got for C in range 4. For is part of the Python language. C, this is a counter which is being used to identify where we're at within a loop. C is not built into the Python language. We can give it any name we want. It's like a variable. We could call it counter, or we could call it C, or we could say cat. But if you're studying IGCSE Computer Science, your teacher should have told you, or if you're one of my students, I should have told you, right? You must use meaningful variables or identifiers within your program. You can't use like for C in range. So now we've got for counter in range. Range allows us to look at the number of times the loop has iterated or repeated itself. And if we want it to repeat 4 times or 8 times, what we're going to be able to do is change the number which is between these parentheses here. So this is a for loop. We call it a limited loop. It repeats X number of times. What we're doing here is we're printing first name, a piece of data which we entered in program number 1. So if I enter Bob, incorrect place, so Bob, 17, we're going to see Bob prints 1, 2, 3, 4 times because we have set up a for loop to run 4 times. Now this colon here, when you set a condition and press enter, the cursor is automatically going to indent itself. You can see it's not beginning at the beginning of the line. An indentation in programming, or indentation in programming, is very, very important because if something's indented, it means this condition is going to be carried out. Okay? If it's not indented, that means there's no condition. So that means when I run the program, it's going to error. Okay? So anything you want to be repeated within a for loop, okay, this needs to be indented, and Python does this automatically for you. Never mess around with your indentation if you're new to programming, otherwise it can be a bit of a nightmare to solve. So moving on to the next thing here. So we're being asked a question against a variable, so it's saying, what's your favorite food? And now I'm going to introduce you to our second loop. So this is a while loop. This is a forever loop. It goes around and around and around and repeats itself until a condition is true. So we're saying while q fav food. That's our variable. We're going to enter a piece of data over here. It's saying while is not equal to fav food. Fav food is pizza spelt with capital P, capital I. If I write over here, I do love a good curry, so I'm going to write in curry. This is not our answer. So that means we're going to be asked this question again and again and again. Because indented underneath our while loop is they're not convinced by our answer and they're saying, you need to answer this question again. I can continue to write pizza, no capital P or I. I do love a good calamari dish or some seafood. Let's write in seafood. And every time I write something which is not equal to, this is an example of a constant here, it's going to loop. If I now write in pizza, spelt correctly, it's going to allow us to continue to the next part of the program, which is going to say, glad to say we like the same foods. And this is a while loop, and this is how it works, and this is a for loop. Now, in terms of where would you use a while loop, so if you want to have a condition which repeats itself again and again until a particular answer is true, this would be where you use a while loop. A for loop is useful if you need a program or a question or an answer to just be iterated or repeated a set number of times. Now, the last thing which we're moving on to in this video is if statements here. And if is choice. So we're being asked a question here. It's saying, how old are you? We've got age preset, which is set to 22 here, integer being whole number. And we're saying if question, or if age question is less than age preset, so if I enter a value less than 22 here, it's going to say I'm older than you. Now, you already know from my first video, I'm forever 21. I'm going to press on enter, and it should print the statement, I am older than you. Correct. If I entered a value which is bigger than this, or bigger than the default value, it would say you are older than me. And this is your first lesson on selection. Here we've got multiple answers to a particular condition. If we're less than the preset age, it says I'm older than you. If we're older, or if this condition is not true, it will run the else condition. Now, this is your first lesson on programming with loops and a basic lesson on if statements. So I hope this has made sense. Again, if you're not one of my students, you want access to our slides, just drop me a message underneath this video. And I look forward to seeing you in our next video on programming with Python as part of the IGCSE Computer Science series of videos.